This is the Crime Cafe, where I interview some of the best authors in crime fiction, suspense, and thriller fiction. I'm Debbie Mack, the host of Crime Cafe, and it's my pleasure to interview Ben Sobieck today. However, before I get to that, I would like to let you know that if you want to buy a really great story package, it's available. Everybody who gets interviewed at the Crime Cafe has contributed to the Crime Cafe story package, which is available on my website, crimecafe.net, for only 99 cents. You won't find a better bargain on the internet, I'm telling you. Some great stories on there, novels, short stories, and essays for only 99 cents. Also, if you would like our Facebook page and leave a review for us on iTunes, I'd greatly appreciate that. All the social media good word that you can spread would be greatly appreciated. So, having said that, I'd like to introduce my guest, a wonderful writer and a weapons expert, Ben Sobieck. And I remember we met on, I believe it was Crime Spot. Isn't that correct, Ben?
Yeah, it was one of the old Ning networks that
Yes.
popped up there for a while that were really popular. Yeah, that one was all about crime fiction. I remember that. Yeah, you would you just come out with Identity Crisis, I think.
That's right. Yes, and I remember you and L.J. Sellers were both people I got to know through that network.
Yeah.
And very glad that I did. So welcome to the show, and thanks for being on.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here. You do a great job with this podcast, and I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. And let's see. Let me start off with asking you about the invisible hand, because
Sure.
I was intrigued by the premise. See, I used to work as an attorney for EPA.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
I'm always kind of following environmental issues and interested in the environmental law. And of course, I'm familiar with fracking. So why don't you explain to our listeners what fracking is and about the plot of your story?
Yeah, well, fracking is, I guess people think it's a new technology. It's been around for a few decades, but it's a way of extracting oil out of the ground, shale oil. So it's not just sitting there in a liquid form. Although I went to school for journalism, people, so bear with me. It's a way of pumping water and other chemical into the ground to cause that shale to fracture, and then that oil or fossil fuel, the raw form of it, comes out of the shale, and then that's pumped up out of the ground. That's the most simple way that I can put it. Most people have heard about fracking in the news lately as it relates to North Dakota, at least around where I am. I'm in Minnesota right now, and although we don't often go to North Dakota, it's still there, and there's still an oil boom going on there, or oil contraction, I suppose, now with the low gas prices, and this is January 2016 we're talking. But my family has a farm in central North Dakota. It's about 1,000 acres. It's not in the oil boom, but it's oil boom adjacent. But anybody who has been up in North Dakota before the oil boom and after, and when all the fracking and other energy development came into the state, would know that the state is completely different than what it was before this oil and energy development moved in. And on the plus side, this provided a lot of jobs, especially during this last recession we had, where people were out of work. People came from all over the country, sometimes from different parts of the world, to work, and you could make a lot of money in a short period of time without a lot of education or much of a skill set. And that, I guess, that was the upside. The downside was it's a very remote, rural state. Even the big cities in North Dakota don't really have all that many people. They have, sometimes it's transient, sometimes it's workers, sometimes it's just people who live there. But really, there are no big concentrations of people. But suddenly, out of nowhere, you get this massive influx of people coming in to work, and they're making a lot of money, and there's nothing to do. with that money in North Dakota. Usually they send it home, but sometimes it just gets stuck there. It changes the dynamic of the state itself. And I thought it would be important to capture a piece of that, not necessarily the crime element of that, but just the bigger picture of what that could mean for a state, or sometimes even the global scale, which is where I'm going with The Invisible Hand. It's set in the oil boom. The characters are in the oil boom, but the oil boom is something bigger than the characters themselves. There have been a couple takes on this, and I think a lot of people, when they write about it, at least in the crime fiction genre, they're trying to pull some sort of crime or scheme out of the oil boom, where the characters are trying to make money and they get involved in drugs, and then they shoot each other and on and on. And that's fine. I mean, that's just one take that you could take on this part of history. But what I wanted to show is that nothing happens in a vacuum, especially with a commodity like oil, in that if there was, I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, because I'm not promoting this idea, but I'm just throwing it out there with the novel, that if something like oil is so important to global markets and the stability of the United States and energy independence, all these things, if it's so important, don't you think that there's somebody somewhere in the world that is going to make sure that if some little thing like a piece of land is sold to the right person, or or mineral rights are exploited in a certain way, so that this energy development could move forward, don't you think that that person, whoever it is, wherever they are, would go in and make sure that that little thing happened? And that's kind of that's what I wanted to explore with The Invisible Hand. So what you have is a series of murders that happen, and the wrong person dies because this tract of land was going to be sold, and then this person dies, and now the land's not going to get sold. And really, on its own, it's not that big of a deal, because land goes back and forth in these. I mean, people in North Dakota own thousands of acres. A parcel of 1,000 acres isn't that much. But if it's critical to some sort of energy development, well, now it suddenly becomes a big deal, because that energy development, if it doesn't happen, is going to affect international politics and on and on and on. And the oil boom in North Dakota is just the epicenter of something, and the ripple effect is huge. But this isn't a global thriller conspiracy kind of thing. It's about the people who have to live through that when this other interest comes to town. So somebody dies, they take off, and per usual, detectives have to go find this murderer. But then there's this other element that comes in that is very, very interested in making sure that this plot of land, despite however this murder might have played out, this plot of land is sold to the correct people so that this energy development can go forward. And that's far more important than the murder itself. So it perverts the legal process, the sense of justice that you'd normally expect from a detective story, because you have this interest that only cares about getting this energy development to move forward. And that's not so far off from the truth. I think, but I'm not the conspiracy theory I come across as, no matter how many times I say it. I'm not, but it's a thought experiment that should make anybody with an interest in economics, or I mean, in your case, I mean, being an attorney with the EPA, you must know that there are some interests out there who are very particular about the way things happen in certain events. So
for sure.
Right. And this might be a place where that happens. I don't know, but I got to think it's logical. There's a logic to it that makes perfect sense.
Wow. That sounds absolutely gripping. I mean, stories like that take a situation and go beyond the obvious to something that's bigger and involves a societal, on a large scale, society's issues are mysteries that really appeal to me.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I got the sense that they appealed to you from your first novel, Cleansing Eden.
Yeah, yeah.
I remember that one, and I remember it was about a journalist. There was a journalist in there, and there was a lot of focus on celebrity culture and drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And so talk about that a little bit, because I enjoy Cleansing Eden a lot. What gave you the idea? Was it your work in journalism, or was there something else?
Oh, thank you. Well, I appreciate that. I don't hear that a lot about that novel. I think that one was me still having being a little wet behind the ears with some of my writing things. But you're right. Yeah, I started as a newspaper reporter in Minnesota, and then I moved on to Wisconsin, where I took a position as an editor for a knife magazine, which seems unrelated, but in some ways it is. You get a glimpse of how. You get a glimpse of how people form their perceptions about the world. Having worked in media, in not just in my industry, I still work for the same publisher of that knife magazine, just in some different ways. But what I wanted to do with Cleansing Eden was show that you're not really like I'm a product of the things that I'm exposed to in my life, which may or may not have anything to do with what's actually going on in the world. It's kind of like Plato's cave, where everybody's looking at these shadows on the wall and they're pretty sure that, yeah, this is how it works. Yeah, I got it figured out. Here's these shadows. They show up at certain times. Well, not that. That's kind of like existing in a media saturated culture. You are the product of all the little bits that you see around you, and you don't actually have an identity. You just have pieces of other people and other ideas inserted into you, and it'd be your parents again, or maybe your friends, or the pop culture you consume, or something like that. And I guess it appealed more to me when I wrote it and had just gotten out of college and trying to figure out the hell am I going to do with my life and how am I going to pay off this debt. So some of that was nervousness, trying to discover what my identity was in the midst of all these things, having just gone through this process called college, where people are telling you all of this different information, trying to mold you into a different person than you were when you got there. Got me to think, maybe I don't actually know who the hell I even am. And could that same effect be happening on a larger scale, like through entertainment? And if that's true, we have pieces of Oprah, we have pieces of I'm not hip anymore. I'm sorry. I'm gonna I don't know, Justin Bieber. Okay, if he's not cool anymore, insert whatever else is cool that took his place since then. But we got all these pieces of other celebrities inside of people running around all over the place. And nobody really knows why. Like, why would I sacrifice the one piece of my identity, the one life that I have? I'm basically exchanging that piece of my identity in order to be entertained in a certain way. And what if you realized that one day and you woke up and you said, this is a giant scam and I'm going to go out and kill every celebrity I can find? Now, not me and not you, of course. I'm not saying that, but the characters in the book think that.
Yeah.
And one of their targets is a journalist, and one of their targets is a celebrity. And it takes this character who doesn't have a name at the beginning. The story follows that character as he is manipulated into killing all of these people on behalf of this deranged psychopath that sounds a lot like the rant that I just did, but I'm not advocating anybody to go out and kill somebody. I'm telling you that, well, right, yeah. I'm just saying it's this character has to go through that process to realize that, no, wait, what you just said was actually the wrong thing, because it's okay to take these pieces of other people and these other experiences to mold your own identity, because people have been doing that since the beginning of time. We wake up and we need to be social so that we know who we are in relation to everything else. It's okay to do that. But in the process, you see the story unfold from this person's life as he goes about killing these people, and then also this journalists who cover the celebrity killings, which in their own way are committing these acts of identity theft. So it's maybe I should have called it Identity Crisis, maybe, but the title was already taken. So.
Well, I got to say that I love the way you think. It's like you think big and philosophically about these various stories.
Oh yeah, and that's part of the reason why I got into crime fiction. Is it's a perfect outlet to explore these topics vicariously without killing people, of course, but also because there's so much more to crime fiction going on than just the crime. And I think that's always been the benefit of this genre, is that the issues of morality and the issues of philosophy. I mean, you have philosophical battles between good and evil in crime stories, but really, the mouse looks at the cat like the cat is the devil, but the farmer who wants mice away from his grain looks at the cat like God. Who is good and who is evil always depends on your perspective. And that part is where I think this genre really excels, is getting to the nut of those really hard moral questions, because to kill somebody, I think you have to be in your most raw and primitive state. And that's where a lot of those questions start. So it's a great genre for doing that.
Great thoughts. And
yeah,
I agree. What's it been like to write Vince Zandri's books? You worked on one, and I would think it would be difficult to pick up a series and just to extend it yourself.
Yeah, so I picked up the 5th installment of his Chase Baker series, and that's a series that started with a book called The Shroud Key, and it's kind of like a mix between Rambo and Dan Brown, and it's probably the best way I can put it. There's a lot more action and a lot more of the pulpy side of Dan Brown, but I still don't even like comparing the series against Dan Brown. I just, because he's not in vogue with us writer types or something, but I think he's all right. He's a good guy. We just don't write the same stuff. But anyway, it's not hard to pick up on a series that works in episodic formats. There isn't one continuous storyline. So I had gotten to know Vince very well through through Crime Space, where I first came across you, is where I first came across Vince and became more or less a Vince Zandri fanboy. I read all of his books and reviewed them, and I got to know not only what he was writing, but how he wrote, by the way that he formats his chapters and aligns his characters, and the way that he builds the plot. I started to dissect that to the point where when Crime Spree magazine asked for a bio of his career, he just turned it back over to me to write. So I apparently he thought I knew more about him than even he did. So after that, I had started a survival magazine called Living Ready, which was about preparedness and disasters. And I think you're on the East Coast, so you're about to go through that. I'm not sure where you are, but
I'm in the path of the blizzard.
Yeah, and we had a whole issue about cold weather preparedness. So it was a great magazine while it was around. It's since morphed into a book brand, but at the time I needed a freelancer to do some certain articles for this magazine, and he came on board and did it, and it was great. They were great articles. They were on newsstands coast to coast. It was awesome. It was a great time, and he really enjoyed it, and we kept in touch, and eventually just asked me to be a franchisee of this series, which I was honored to take part in, and I'm happy to say after the first one, which was Chase Baker and the Viking Secret, I'll be doing another one about ultra-terrestrials, which doesn't really have a title right now, or it has a working title, but it's an experience. I think this franchise model where you pair somebody who isn't as known for their fiction, or maybe as well known as they'd like to be for their fiction, like myself and Vince Zandri, who sold hundreds of thousands of ebooks, franchising out a series character to somebody else to write and being very upfront about it. I mean, there's no smoke and mirrors here. My name's on the cover, so is his, and people know. But that model seems to work really well, and if you can pull it off. Yeah, it's not and it's all through self-publishing. There's no publisher involved or anything. This is just between he and I, and it works really well. It's two people writing on a project. There's not a lot of lawyers involved. There's not a lot of agents involved. We have an agreement in place, but I'm free to write what I want. He approves the outline that I send him, and that's it. I'm struggling to find like a challenge here, because it's one of the best projects I've ever worked on, because it's so liberating to not build a character or flesh out an environment. He's already done all that. I'm just stepping in and coming up with the plot and dropping characters in and having them shoot at each other and chase aliens around and everything. It's great. It's a good time.
I think that is so awesome. And when next time you talk to Vince, tell him I said hi.
I will. Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
because
yes.
we've interacted online, but not like this.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I can't let you go without asking you about mentioning your blog, The Writer's Guide to Weapons.
Oh yeah.
By the way, I subscribe to.
Oh, thank you very much.
The book that you put out through Writer's Digest about it.
Yeah.
How did you become a weapons expert?
Well, I guess I don't know that I am a weapons expert. Full disclosure, I'll take that as a compliment, you calling me that. I'm not going to turn that down. But if I had, I mean, I know weapons experts, and I know that I'm not up in their league. I got into that role because I started working for this knife magazine, which had a bunch of sister publications like Gun Digest, Tactical Gear, Modern Shooter, a lot of firearms-centric publications. And it wasn't the go out and kill somebody type of stuff. This is very technical information. It's industry information. It's for people who know a whole lot about this topic. I mean, down to the dimensions of the screws used on certain rifles back in the day, or it's just very technical stuff. So I didn't come into that as an expert. I came into that as an editor and as somebody who knew something about transitioning magazine and book brands that have been around for 100 years into 2016, where just being a book isn't enough anymore. You have to come up with something else. So that's how I came into it, is more from the digital business strategy side of it. But at the same time, I was still working editorial, and I was around some very smart people who know a lot about this topic. I probably, well, I wouldn't even say probably, they are the world's best resources on two legs for this information. And they're writing books for us, they're writing magazine articles for us, and then I was exposed to a lot of information. And what I came out of that, and I'm still there. I mean, didn't leave that job, but what I got out of that was how to communicate about firearms and knives to people who don't know anything about them. And that's how I gained the appearance of being an editor, or being an expert. I see myself more as a communicator of this information, in the same way that Bill Nye the Science Guy isn't the top of his field at everything that he talks about. I don't know what degrees he actually has, but I know that he's not number one in everything. He's a communicator. And
Exactly.
in the same, yeah, or like Carl Sagan.
Layman's terms.
Yeah, exactly. So I wondered if that could be translated into something useful for people who didn't necessarily know a lot about this topic and just wanted something that was quick and easy to learn. And whether regardless of what they think of guns and knives. I mean, if they've never touched one, if they love them, politically, it doesn't. None of that even matters, because guns and knives only work one way. The laws of physics don't change depending on your experiences. So how could I distill that into something that was useful to other writers? And as it turned out, this is an idea I had for a long time, because I read this crime fiction, read these online stories, and it's sometimes you just run into people who don't know what they're talking about, and they look like idiots for it. I'm sorry. It ruins the story if you know what to look for. It's like English majors coming across irregardless in something. Mm-hmm. They can't not see that. Like they can't. Mm-hmm. It bugs them, and it was bugging me. And really, it was doing these writers were doing a disservice to themselves, because they had great stories. Otherwise, they were just cocking hammers on Glocks. They were calling every knife a switchblade. They were making silencers out of Play-Doh and book covers or something. I don't know. They were just doing all these things that made them look like morons. And the thing that got me is that these mistakes were repeated over and over again. So people were actually getting the information by reading books and watching movies. And I think the problem was they just didn't know where to look, or know who to ask, or even maybe they were afraid to ask. Because if there's certain things I don't know what topic, but if I didn't know a lot about it, I might be hesitant to ask somebody. So it's not enough for me to just come up with a blog post about something and just chastise people or point my fingers. And I never do that. I never call anybody out for making a mistake. I only ever talk about the information. The writer is completely separate from that, and I think that's important. But what's the best way I can do that? All right, I've gone through the long way, and the short way is Writer's Digest books was the best way to do that. And here's my book, The Writer's Guide to Weapons, and they took me on and let me write a huge book that has gone on to do a lot of. I think it's successful. I hope people think it's successful. I think it's done very well, and the parts that couldn't get into that book turned into my blog, which is crimefictionbook.com. And I'm continuing that same mission of education, of trying to make people look their best when they put out their manuscripts. And I do it in a way that I think is different from some of the other information out there, in that you're always gonna you still don't have to know a single thing about guns or knives. Nobody's yelling at you, and you're walking away with a better sense of how to write this information without actually having to touch anything. Those have been my 3 planks of this process the entire time, and I think it's gone over really well. And people really like the website. They really like the book. People in Europe especially like the book, and I think that has something to do with laws in that part of the world, where maybe it's more difficult to find access to firearms, or they just didn't grow up with the same sort of outdoors heritage that somebody like myself did, where guns and knives were just a part of how I grew up. It's really cool to see people respond to that, and they seem to enjoy it. And the blog is just another way of reaching them and making sure that they're getting that information. I just enjoy doing it too. It helps me stay connected and helps me talk to people from all over it. It's just a great experience. I'm glad that people have found it, because at the time I didn't know if it was going to work. But there's enough interest in this. There's enough depraved writer minds out there that they want to know about guns and knives and the best way to outfit their characters. So, yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. And I'm going to have to wrap up here. So,
okay.
But thank you so much for being here today. And I won't go without saying that you also consult on the subject of weapons. So if you want to know anything about weaponry, go to Ben Sobieck's blog,
Yeah.
and just look for the consulting button. And he also has the book as well. And before we go, I'll just say one more time, please give us a like on Facebook, Crime Cafe. And if you would, give us a review on iTunes. And stop by at crimecafe.net, where you'll find the link that says Crime Cafe you can click on and go to all of the interviews in video and audio form, as well as the 99-cent story package and the Crime Cafe merchandise store. So with that, I will say thanks again, Ben, and see everybody in 2 weeks.